Thank you very much for coming. This was a talk I gave several years ago at the Scarborough Historical Society, but I used transparencies. Remember those? And this time, I'm the 21st century, so now I'm using PowerPoint. This is a subject that has always interested me because it is also a real commentary on how people fell for these kinds of medicines and actually felt that this was really going to help them become better overnight, from hair growth to your throat, to your kidneys, to everything. And it is really an interesting subject. So I'm going to begin by giving you a little history of patent medicines. The phrase patent medicines comes from the late 17th century marketing of medical elixirs. Those who were favored by royalty were issued what they called letters patent, authorizing the use of royal endorsement in advertising. As early as 1692, the Boston Almanac advertised what they called aqua antiterminalis, a cure for the, quote, griping of the guts and the wind colic, and, quote, that woeful distemper. Some of this is going to sound really bad. The woeful distemper of the dry belly ache. It was sold by Benjamin Harris, who published America's first newspaper called Public Occurrences. Now in 1715, a couple named Thomas and Sibylla Masters applied for a patent from the English king for a device to refine corn. They were the first recipients of a patent granted by the mother country. Besides using the device to pound the maize, they claimed the corn they were refining as, quote, excellent medicine in consumptions and other distempers. It became known as Tuscarora rice and probably was America's first patent medicine. In 1790, the United States Patent Office was established, and the very first, what we think the first patent medicine, was issued to Samuel Lee Jr. of Windham, Connecticut. Lee's patent protected what he labeled bilious pills, which contained a potent mixture of aloes, soap, nitrate of potassium, and something called gamboge or gambooze, which is a gum resin that was used as a yellow pigment and as a medicine as a purgative. Others soon followed and marketed as a sure cure for anything from yellow fever, dropsy, to worms and female complaints. Instead of a patent to protect the product, this was really curious. What they did was the proprietor chose to name the medicine with catchy trade names, such as Texas Wonder, Hall's Great Discovery for kidney and bladder troubles, and something called Black Gin for kidneys. The name would be registered trademark, which gave the owner exclusive ownership of the name. So never mind what you put in the bottle. What was important was this really flashy name and would catch people's attention. Okay, the use of patent medicines in the United States dates back to the early days of the Republic, when drugs were imported from Europe and Asia, such as cocaine, opium, morphine, and amphetamines. The medicines were sold by postmasters, goldsmiths, grocers, and tailors. Following the Revolution, promoters played on the growing sense of nationalism in advanced cures made from America Flora. So patent medicine use expanded during the presidency of Andrew Jackson, as Americans rebelled against traditional doctors and endorsed quackery. And I wanted to find out where the word quackery came from. It's associated with health fraud, obviously, was a clipped term for quack saver or solver, or it was a Dutch term meaning a hawker of salve. In the Middle Ages, the term quack meant shouting, and shout they did. The growth of now one thing too is that when I mentioned that they were not, Americans started to use this medicines, they got away from doctors because they felt that doctors took too long to get to them and they were more expensive. So the growth of patent medicines, it grew alarmingly at mid-century due to the passage of legislation in 1793 by Congress and also through the growth of the number of newspapers. The penny press, started by Benjamin Day in 1833, was marketed to the mass audience and cost just 1 penny. To recover the revenue, Day and his competitors sought profit from advertising. Well, patent medicines were the perfect products, supporting sensational stories appearing in penny papers. Patent medicine manufacturers were the first to advertise to a national audience, and newspapers were the perfect vehicles for this. In the 19th century, there were many reasons why patent medicines were so well accepted. One was man's continued search for cheap, quick, painless remedies for good health. It was cheaper to seek a cure in a potion container than to summon a doctor who could take longer to get to a patient. One of the most successful patent medicines was Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound. Her grandmotherly image, with her gray hair drawn back into a braided bun, her serene expression became known throughout the country. Lydia Estes grew up in a middle-class Quaker family in Lynn, Massachusetts. The family was involved in the abolitionist, feminist, and temperance movements of the day. She met Frederick Douglass and various activists of the time. She also became interested in alternative remedies for ailments and began concocting her famous compound for, quote, female complaints and weaknesses. In 1873, our country went through an economic panic, a crisis, and it was due to many factors. One of them being, there are multiple causes of the post-Civil War inflation, Reconstruction, the stock market. It was international. It was a terrible thing, and it affected Lydia and her family. Her husband lost a lot of money, and financially they were pretty broke. So then she began to think, well, maybe I'll start promoting my compound. So her son, Will, submitted advertising copy with her image, and his mother's smile boosted sales so much that they moved the operation to a building next door to their house. Playing up that it was, quote, home brewed, Lydia and Will brewed the first batches of the medicine in the cellar of their house. The original formula called for, sounds really strange, but it's unicorn root, life root, black cohosh, pleurisy root, fenugreek seed macerated and suspended in approximately 19% alcohol. No wonder it made you feel good. So a note about the ingredients. Now, unicorn root is a very rare flowering plant, come to find out. Life root was traditionally used to hasten labor and relieve labor pains and a wide range of illnesses from colds to hemorrhage. It's now considered a toxic plant and possibly carcinogenic. That's what you were thinking. Pleurisy root was used for coughs, bronchitis, and swine flu, and fenugreek seed, or Greek seed, sorry, was primarily used for cooking, but also to treat boils. Yeah, it's like I'm writing this going, oh God, this is terrible. In World War I, of course, and Lydia Pinkham's compound is still on sale. I found out that you can get it at Walmart. So by the time Lydia, who's promoting this, and you notice I believe it's World War I, attention sick women, to do your duty during these trying times, your health should be first consideration, so you know. So by the time she died in 1883, the company was bringing in about $300,000 a year, and that's in 19th century money. I thought this was really cute. This came out of a scrapbook that Mark owns, and it shows the shining little cheeks, and it's just a really cute little girl who probably was given a little bit of the compound to make her feel better. These three are examples of a man, his name was James Cook Ayer. Now, Ayer made a fortune promoting all of these medicines. He was born in Groton, Connecticut in 1818. He became the wealthiest patent businessman of his day. While apprenticed to James C. Robbins, he was a druggist in Lowell, Mass. He studied medicine and later graduated from the medical school of the University of Pennsylvania. He never practiced medicine, but instead he put all his energies into establishing a factory in Lowell to manufacture his medicinal preparations. The factory became the largest of its kind in the world with up-to-date equipment. His fortune at the time was estimated at $20 million. He died on July 3rd, 1878. This was rather sad when I started, again, researching him. He died in Winchton, Massachusetts, and according to Appleton's Encyclopedia of American Biography, he died of anxiety and care brought about a brain difficulty, and for some time prior to his death, he was confined to an asylum. I believe that that means that he probably had some serious, probably depression. Now, I focus on these a minute because they are important, because the images started to get very exotic. If you notice the one at the bottom on the left, scenes of Africa, very exotic, the palm trees and so on. It would bring people in that this was something that people would buy. They always used young women and children as images of this is what happens when you take Ayer's, his cherry pectoral syrups, and you'll feel better. So he used this example here of the healthy little girl, and then right above it, it's a medicine that he purported to, he actually thought that this would cure all malarial disorders. So he, again, using a very exotic background to advertise his medicines. Another one, oh, here's another image of Hall's. This is Hall's vegetable Sicilian hair renewer. On the side, this was also a big business. There are several really, at the height of the advertising in newspapers, I noticed too that they would show a before and after. The woman who was losing her hair and was just at her wit's end, so she took Hall's vegetable Sicilian hair renewer, and the next day her hair was down to her ankles. So a lot of this too, it really was very clever advertising that really brought in a lot of people who were kind of desperate. So that's another one of those quack medicines. Another really big success story was a man named Hulbert Harrington Warner. He began his career in Rochester, New York, and he was selling fireproof safes, which made him a millionaire. But he wanted to cash in on this big business of patent medicines. So this all came about for personal health issues that he had. He tried Dr. Craig's kidney cure and made dramatic improvements which convinced him of the great possibilities of promoting this type of medicine. He sold his safe business and decided to acquire Dr. Craig's patent medicine business. His most successful medicine was Warner's Safe Kidney and Liver Cure. I noticed a lot of these medicines were geared towards people who supposedly had kidney problems, liver issues, hair problems, but mostly geared towards liver and kidneys. It was remarkable. So he sells his safe business, and I also noticed too that in the way that he advertised it, he always put a big safe in front, a symbol of saying, you know, this is fine, you'll be safe if you take my medicine. So his most successful medicine was Warner's Safe Kidney and Liver Cure. Now the ingredients had 308 grains of extract of a type of plant that probably today would be considered not very good for you. He had extracts of liverwort, wintergreen, and 90% alcohol.
Oh, 90%.
Now, he made a fortune.
Wow.
His business was international. And, he made a fortune off of all this. He was really, really one of the big businessmen in this. He unfortunately got into trouble financially when he tried to sell his business to English investors in 1892 for $3.4 million. Unfortunately, in 1893, there was another recession and England was hit with it, so they couldn't pay him. So he lost pretty much everything. He lost money. So, the business went down. He lost $3.4 million. Popular movements in the 19th century furthered the success of patent medicines. The first and most popular was one founded by Samuel Thomson called Thomsonianism. Now, he believed a disease resulted from a clogged system and was cured by purging and sweating. He was in favor of Native American vegetables and bloodletting. In 1813, he received a patent for his, quote, system. He promoted medical training. He quoted it as Thomsonium Materia Medica and a new guide to health. He was critical of formal doctors for a personal reason. He blamed the death of his mother on inept physicians. Quote, he gave her disease the name galloping consumption, which I thought was a very appropriate name for the writers, and they galloped her out of the world in about 9 weeks. In 1840, he founded his own Botanic Medical College. His remedies were widely advertised. He used agents to go and market his product. His 16-page instructional manual was included in the membership package in, quote, friendly botanic societies. And the fee for becoming a member was $20, but additional $2, you could get separate copies of his autobiography. Another big health person who was actually rather ahead of his time was Sylvester Graham, as in the Graham cracker. In 1837, he was supposed to speak in Boston, and he had preached what they called a radical gospel of fresh air, exercise, weekly bathing, meatless and liquor-free meals. Well, the Bostonians didn't like that. Neither did the bakers or the butchers. So he advocated for vegetarianism and promoted drinking pure water. That year, he had published a treatise on bread and bread making. He even demanded that millers put the nutritional brand back in the white bread. The white bread was becoming very popular. So what happened is, when he was supposed to speak in Boston, a mob of mostly made up of butchers and millers and commercial bakers waited for Graham to arrive. They were hissing, making barking noises, and chanting his name. He was warned of this, so he did not come to Boston. However, despite the negative reception that he seemed to have gotten in Boston, he was still a very popular speaker. He was much sought after. He was born in 1794 in Connecticut. He had a very tumultuous childhood. I think that had a lot to do with why he got into this. His father died when he was 2, and his mother, unfortunately, was mentally ill. He spent most of his young life moving from one relative's house to another. He was working in a tavern, a relative's tavern, and he was exposed to a lot of drunks and drunkenness, which led him to a lifetime hatred of alcohol. His followers were called Grahamites, and he sparked a movement for health reform, influencing such luminaries as Catherine Beecher. Catherine Beecher wrote a lot of manuals on housekeeping. She was the sister of Harriet Beecher Stowe. William Alcott and his first cousin, Bronson Alcott, was Louisa May Alcott's father. And the father of the cornflake, John Harvey Kellogg. Now I've got a picture. Let's see. This is not John Harvey, this is the brother. And I put him up there because the two of them had a major falling out. John Harvey Kellogg, along with his brother Will, they founded a sanatorium in Battle Creek, Michigan. In 1876, it became a world-famous spa, medical center and grand hotel. It attracted celebrities. The brothers created something new, ready-to-eat cereals, like cornflakes when they made them. The rationale behind the cereals was that they were easily digestible. The 19th century diet tended to be heavy in animal fats, cured meats, salty and sugary foods, causing upset stomachs and dyspepsia. Alcohol and caffeine consumption, together with a diet high in carbohydrates, contributed to the, quote, great American stomachache. So here is John Harvey Kellogg, who was a real fanatic of a very rigid diet and exercise, and you don't eat this, you don't eat that. Will comes along and probably was thinking, I think we need to really do something different. So he thought, why don't we add sugar to the cereal? Well, of course, his brother went apoplectic and said no. And Will decided, okay, well, I'm going to break off and I'm going to start the Kellogg company. So John Harvey could not use that name at all. So he was kind of relegated to the side. And today, of course, we have Kellogg's Corn Flakes and so many, many, many cereals under that company name. So that's Will. Another popular movement involved mineral water. And I have a bottle here. This is J.W. Ransley, one of my relatives. And he started a mineral water bottling plant in East Orange, New Jersey. And I have the bottle. So mineral water, probably influenced by Sylvester Graham, who promoted pure water. So I found my late Aunt Jane gave me this bottle. So I'm trying to find some more about him. So if you had And of course, images were perfect. Look at this, the innocent little girl taking her tooth powder. There's no problem after it's in here. So if you had, and of course, images were perfect. Look at this, the innocent little girl drinking mineral water, tooth powder. There's no problem after it's. And in 1971, the New Republic newspaper ran an ad for bottled mineral water called Mystic Water from David's Well. And all this water came from Bristol, Pennsylvania. The ad promised that the water would purify and enrich the blood, increase appetite, vitalize the nervous system, and would help in paralysis, diabetes, kidney ailments, again, asthma. So before the Civil War, many mineral water establishments began to expand their treatments, featuring electrothermal baths, Russian steam baths, and the popular Turkish bath. Well, because Americans are very entrepreneurial and very businesslike, decided to cash in on this, and there was an explosion of spas. But what the Americans did was they provided all sorts of entertainment and games, and they served liquor and food and wines and different kinds of ales and beers at these spas. The total opposite of the Kellogg's, who probably, if John Harvey Kellogg found out, I think he would just die. It's just like, no, you don't do this at a spa. You don't drink ale and liquors. Everybody liked it, and everybody went. And a reporter once asked a patron of one of these spas, what about the mineral water? And he said, oh, it was nice. It was okay. But he's more interested in, the food, the liquor. So from the 19th century and into the early 20th century, patent medicines, I'm going to it's my favorite. I love it. From the 19th century into the early 20th century, patent medicines, special foods, ointments, vegetable compounds, pills, syrups, and elixirs were much a part of an American household medicine cabinet, as ordinary aspirin is today. Home remedies were available in stores, in catalogs, and by direct mail from manufacturers. Sears and Roebuck catalog featured a lot of this. In the fall of 1909, Sears and Roebuck's catalog featured among the eclectic products they sold were home medicines, which included Dr. Hammond's nerve and brain food, Sirocco specific for the tobacco habit, and a remedy for hair growth. Sears had its own compound. They manufactured something called celery malt compound, which contained celery seed, liquid extract of malt, and coca leaves. The company claimed that the compound was, quote, a recognized nerve and brain medicine. Quote, if you are nervous, exhausted, cannot sleep, and digestion is imperfect, we recommend a trial of celery malt compound. So the advertising convinced the consumer that each brand swore to provide better health. Payne's celery compound, a nerve tonic, hit the market in 1872. Remember, please, that there is no Food and Drug Act going on here. Everybody's jumping in. Everybody's making lots of money. So when Payne's celery came out, it hits the market in 1872. By the 1890s, celery remedies were in such demand that consumers were drowning in celery bitters, celery crackers, and celery cola. Americans obsessed with kidney, bladder, liver, heart afflictions use Simmons liver regulator washed down with some water. The most famous ones, and I have a bottle of that too, the Kilmer brothers from Binghamton, New York, brewed, quote, family remedies, or they claim they were family remedies, with names like Ocean Weed Heart Remedy, Prompt Perilla Liver Pills, and the hot-selling Swamp Root. a man named William Swaim introduced Swaim's panacea, a cure for cancer, gout, hepatitis, scrofula, and the early stages of syphilis. Pardon me, but it was just like beyond. The Kilmers, so if you had Dr. Kilmer, and of course images were perfect. Look at this, the innocent little girl taking it's from Binghamton, New York. So if you had, and of course images were perfect. Look at this, Kilmer. He built a sanitarium at Sarasota Springs, 10 miles east of Binghamton. In the mid-1870s, he established what he called a cancertorium. Dr. Kilmer would apply ointments with secret ingredients as a non-operative treatment for cancer. Supposedly the cancerous tumor would fall away. He promoted a line of pills, ointments, home medicines for every ailment. In 1878, his younger brother, Jonas, joined the doctor and became full partner in the business in 1881. Besides the swamp root, they produced medicines that included Indian cough cure and autumn leaf extract. And notice how exotic these names are. In 1882, the brothers built a 5-story building that included a machine that could fill 2,000 bottles per hour. They had a conveyor belt system that facilitated everything from waxing to labeling and packaging. However, in 1893, Jonas had a major conflict with the brother, and he became the sole owner. Now, I wanted to, if you're wondering why it was called swamp root, and I found this out, the origins of the name may be from a plant called in Spanish hierba del manso, which means herb of the swamp. Later name, it has a Latin name, Animopus or Animapis californica, but it grew mostly in Arizona. So very exotic. Okay. So Jonas becomes the sole owner of this. So swamp root actually took off thanks to Willis Sharp Kilmer, who was the son of Jonas. Keeping the image of Andrew Kilmer, elderly doctor with very pronounced whiskers, Willis promoted swamp root, the great kidney specific, which became very profitable. So Willis Kilmer becomes the president of the company in 1912. Company branches were open overseas, like in Rio de Janeiro, Kingston, Jamaica, and London, England. As late as the 1930s and 40s, advertising and almanacs were still being produced. Swamp root was still being distributed in 1960. Willis enjoyed living a life on the grand scale. He invested in horses, in travel, and a newspaper. He had an ocean-going yacht and an estate in Virginia thanks to swamp root. Okay, so here in New England, a soft drink once as popular as Coca-Cola, originally a patent medicine known as beverage moxie nerve food. Its sensational label promised to cure, and this is really unreal, quote, brain and nervous exhaustion, loss of manhood, imbecility and helplessness, softening of the brain and insanity. Okay.
All right.
We all need to pass it around. I was just floored when I read this. Moxie was created by Dr. Augustine Thompson, who was born in Union, Maine. It was created and first produced in Lowell, Mass. It originated as a patent medicine. Thompson added soda water to the formula and changed the name to Beverage Moxie Nerve Food. By 1884, he was selling Moxie both in bottles and in bulk as a soda fountain syrup. In 1885, he received a trademark for the name Moxie. He marketed he marketed it as a, quote, a delicious blend of bitter and sweet, a drink to satisfy everyone's taste. Sure. Moxie is flavored with gentian root extract. It's a very bitter substance, reputed at one time to have medicinal properties. Another form of advertising and marketing were the trade cards, and these are some of them right here. Advertising cards date from 1876 to 1900, and in the technical advances of printing on the Industrial Revolution, more were produced. During the International Centennial Exposition of 1876, held in Philadelphia, Louis Prang and Company lithography firm gave away thousands of these cards. Trade cards were produced in Europe, but not as great as in the United States. Patent medicine trade cards were very popular. For example, with manufacturers like Morse's Yellow Dock, the great liver and kidney remedy, Dr. Kermit's Mandrake pills, cure for liver and kidney disease. And there was a lot of them, including these, Hires root beer. The 19th century saw a boom in almanac publications. The colorful cover pages depicted natural world wonders, dramatic Indian scenes, and historical events. Benjamin Franklin produced the very first almanac, contained useful advice, proverbs, poetry, weather information. However, the medicine makers were a lot more informative. They distributed thousands of these almanacs promoting their brand of cure-alls. James Ayers produced his Ayers Cherry Pectoral, which boasted in their almanac was second only to the Bible in circulation. In 1889, the company distributed more than 25 million publishing in several languages. What's in this stuff here? What was in Lydia's compound? What was in the swamp root? Some of them contained cocaine, caffeine, opium, or morphine. Sears sold a morphine-laced mixture to be slipped into a wayward husband's coffee in order to keep him home at nights. Payne's celery compound contained 21% alcohol. Hostetter's bitters had 44.3%, and Father John's medicine had 94% alcohol with an added ingredient of turpentine. And I found out, and I had a bottle of that in my collection. I couldn't, unfortunately, find it, but Father John's medicine was first formulated by two inventors. They were called Carlton and Hovey in 1855. And it was actually used for the real ailing Father John O'Brien, using the priest as spokesman for the medicine, so his image, the priest who's very aging, and as for their medicine, they began mass producing it. And Lowell, again, the manufacturing capital of all of this, and then they moved it to Cody, Wyoming in the early 1980s. It was primarily a cough suppressant, and it had a licorice taste. Cocaine was a major ingredient in popular medications such as Rogers Cocaine Pile Remedy. And this is where it was made. I cracked up when I saw this. It was made in Moundsville, West Virginia. The Coca Beef Tonic from New York City, and Lloyd's Cocaine Toothache Drops, which I have a little bottle over there. The toothache drops were primarily used for children. Not a good thing. The original Coca-Cola, created in 1886 by Atlanta pharmacist Dr. John Pemberton, contained a small amount of cocaine. Advertised as a, quote, brain tonic and intellectual beverage, it also claimed to ease menstrual discomfort. By 1903, the cocaine was removed, and the hottest selling soft drink is flavored with a non-narcotic extract of coca. Many medicine as represented by children. young women who appeared distressed, and men who were seeking help about hair loss and other problems. This is Ridge's Food. It was an ad and a testimonial from a mother in New York State. The triplets were pictured seated on a plush red chair, looking the monuments of health and beauty because Ridge's Food made all the difference. Back to Hires root beer promoted its drink as, quote, as good for children as for old folks, and, quote, there is only one root beer that stands for health, temperance, and home. Also promoting all of this, they used retired Civil War generals, suffragists such as Belva Lockwood would promote Lydia Pinkham's vegetable compound. A very famous speaker, Rose Hennessy, wrote that when she took Lydia's vegetable compound, she was cured. So all these people, so they were using celebrities already. Very, very interesting, way ahead of their time. How much did some of this cost? Ridge's, like what you saw, Ridge's sold its product in cans, starting at 35 cents a can. Hires charged 25 cents a package, which made, according to the ad, 5 gallons of root beer. A female tonic called Meryl sold for $1 and made claims of curing female complaints, and it also helped in pregnancy. Samuel Gary and Company of New York sold pint and quart bottles between 50 cents and $1 of a patent medicine that cured diseases such as malaria and diphtheria. The ever popular Lydia compound sold for $1 a box. I went online and searched for Lydia Pinkham, and yep, Walmart sells a box of it containing 72 tablets, herbal supplement tablets, a box at $10.24. Well, all of this, this is another little bottle I've got here. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. All of these came to an end. Samuel Hopkins Adams wrote an investigative series in Collier's Weekly. He exposed the alcohol content found in patent medicines, in particular soothing syrups for infants containing opium derivatives. He exposed something that was really surprising to me, something called red clauses in newspaper contracts, providing that patent medicine ads, upon which most newspapers were dependent upon, would be withdrawn if the paper favored any food and drug legislation. Interesting. The series ran from 1905 to 1907. During the height of the temperance movement, Adams claimed that dry states like Maine and Kansas were doing a thriving business with medicines. Quote, for those deprived, one legal and almost respectable recourse was open: the steady pursuit of health through high-proof bitters. At this time, there was no government agency that required medicine makers to prove their medicines safe and effective. No law stopped them from listing on the labels or advertisements whatever cures happened to be in fashion at the time. There was also no warnings at all what this may cause you. Today, of course, we're inundated with ads on television and magazines, and you have like pages and of what it will do if you take this. And it wasn't until 1906 that the Pure Food and Drug Act became a federal food and drug law. It was signed into law by President Theodore Roosevelt. Although it was just a labeling law, most proponents agreed it was a step in the right direction. Later efforts are made to outlaw certain products that were not safe, followed by efforts to outlaw products which were safe but not effective. By 1909, there was an effort to outlaw Coca-Cola because of the excess use of caffeine. Caffeine had replaced cocaine as the active ingredient in 1903. In the case United States versus 40 barrels and 20 kegs of Coca-Cola, the judge found that Coca-Cola had a right to use caffeine as it saw fit. The government appealed to the Supreme Court and Coke lost, but eventually reached a settlement to reduce the caffeine amount. And in closing, Frances Parkinson Keyes was an American novelist who wrote about life as the wife of a U.S. senator. Her novels were set in New England, Louisiana, and Europe. And in one of her novels, she makes this comment about patent medicines. Folks with their wits about them knew that advertisements were just a pack of lies. You had only to look at the claims of patent medicines. I wanted to show you Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. Again, an example of, notice how it says the mother's friend for children teething. Okay, that was an example of this type of advertising. So, and here's another one. This was Hood's tooth powder. Whitens the teeth, sweetens the breath, hardens the gums. Now, Hood and Company was a big, it also produced the famous sarsaparilla, another medicine. That's it. Thank you.